thrilled to have a returning guest, Lori Ann Wood. If you did not listen to her first episode, which was a couple months ago, you have to listen to it. Her story is, it's a must listen to. And so I'm just thrilled to have you back here, Lori Ann. Welcome.
Oh, thanks, Krista. It's great to be back.
And for those who have not listened to your full first episode, I do want you to share a little bit of your story on how you found out about your heart failure.
Well, it happened about 8 years ago. I'll start with the story before the story. Before the story started, I had a medical evaluation for a life insurance policy, and it was to see if I would qualify for the preferred policy. And I'm like, of course I will. I'm all healthy and great. And they told me at that exam that I had less than 3% chance of ever developing heart disease in my lifetime. And so it confirmed what I thought I knew. And then 3 weeks later was Thanksgiving week that year, and I just wasn't feeling well. I felt like I had the flu, maybe pneumonia. I was kind of fatigued and sluggish, and I wasn't hungry. I was just kind of, ugh. And I thought I have a virus or something's going on, maybe I have the flu. And so I went to convenient care because it was a busy week. I went on Sunday before Thanksgiving, and they gave me an antibiotic. And then I wasn't getting any better, and I went back on Wednesday because I thought I'm going to get a steroid shot or something to push me through the holidays, because I had kids at home and I had some coming home from college. And so that time at convenient care, they gave me an inhaler. And it just didn't seem like that was what was going on with me. So I was in bed all day Thanksgiving Day. I wasn't in pain or anything. I just didn't have the wherewithal to get out of bed, even though all my kids were home and they basically had Thanksgiving without me. But that's just where I was, which was really, really atypical for me. And then on Friday, my husband insisted that I go see our family doctor. So he got me in to see him early Friday morning, which is Black Friday. And my doctor immediately listened to my heart with a stethoscope. And he said, if we're lucky, it's pneumonia, which is, I was thinking, worst case scenario. And he then just immediately sent me down for a chest x-ray, and what he found was I had a very enlarged heart, and he direct admitted me to cardiac ICU at my local hospital. And I learned there that I had a diagnosis of end-stage heart failure, and my heart was functioning at just 6%. And it was something I just didn't see coming. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital there, and I was eventually flown to Cleveland Clinic and became their most critical patient for a year and a half. And the short story is I wore a life vest for 9 months, and then I got an internal unit that's made especially for heart failure. And I take a lot of high-powered medications, but heart failure is a chronic progressive disease. So it only goes in one direction, and it never goes away. So in the last 8 years, I've just been dealing with that, and there's been a lot of ups and downs with my health, but it has been a learning experience because it was really something I never saw coming. I never had any family history. I had no risk factors, and it just wasn't on my radar.
And I'm really thankful that you're here today, because I know that this really difficult experience that you had to go through is going to be helpful for others to understand and recognize some of these atypical heart failure signs. And now that you've had 8 long years in and out of the hospital, and you've talked to so many doctors, I would love for you to share what some of these less recognized and atypical symptoms are to help others see these warning signs.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think that people need to realize is something that I didn't understand. When I was admitted to the hospital and I was in cardiac ICU, I was still thinking a heart attack and heart failure were basically the same thing. And I knew that I had great blood pressure. I had all good numbers, and I couldn't understand what was going on. So one of the things I think it's important to know is that a heart attack is something that comes on suddenly, and it's usually from like plaque building up in your arteries, and then either it just constricts your arteries so much, or a part of that breaks off and causes some sort of a clog, and then your heart immediately tells you. But heart failure is a little bit different because it's a gradual process, and it can come from having had a heart attack where that heart attack damaged your heart muscle. But when you have heart failure, it's really just the fact that your heart muscle has been weakened in some way, and it can't pump enough blood to your other organs to do what it needs to do. And so heart failure can come from many different things, and some of the things, but there are some warning signs. I think people understand the heart attack warning signs, the pain in your left arm and the pain in your back and all these things. But for heart failure, they're so much more subtle, and they seem to masquerade as other things much more so. At least they did for me. Some of the ones that I had no idea were heart related. I had an inability to exercise. I would try, at one time I tried to do a couch to 5K. And if you've ever done that, it starts out really, really easy on day 1 and 2. And I couldn't even do day 1 and 2. It was just too hard. And yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that. At what point in your journey did you try to do this couch to 5K? How much before you ended up in the hospital?
I think that was in the summer before I ended up in the hospital. I was trying to remember that. I was going to do it with my daughter. Yeah, a few months. But, if I'm being honest, it feels like heart failure snuck up on me that day in the hospital.
Right, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, because I didn't see it. But I can tell you that I had symptoms for maybe 10 years.
Oh, wow, that long. And so what are some of the other symptoms now that you can look back and reflect on, and now that you have so much more knowledge?
Yeah. So many of these, I thought I was just out of shape. I thought, my husband runs marathons, and my kids were in high school sports, and I knew I was the one that was in the worst physical condition in the family. And so I just thought things like shortness of breath that I was experiencing, difficulty with inclines. Anytime there was a staircase or a hill, I would just be way behind the crowd. And I just thought, wow, I've really let myself go. I need to do that couch to 5K. But right. I never imagined it was something to do with my heart. I also, some other symptoms that I had were an unintended weight gain, and I think for women it's always unintended, but maybe unexplained is a better word. Like I know when I am not eating right on vacation, I know I didn't intend for it, but sometimes, like for example, that week when I was Thanksgiving week, and I was in bed and I didn't even eat Thanksgiving dinner. When they admitted me to the hospital, they always weigh you when you go into the doctor's office. It doesn't matter what you're there for. You could be there for a broken arm, and they're going to put you on the scale. So I stepped on the scale and I went, you got to be kidding. After not eating for a whole week, I've gained weight. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, wow.
And when they got me in the hospital, one of the first things they do for heart failure is to try to get rid of the retained fluid, because with your heart not pumping like it should, it backs up and retains fluid. And so they drained 14 pounds of fluid from me at the hospital.
That's incredible. Mm-hmm. With just that simple, I'm not going to say that, I should not say simple. With the draining of 14 pounds, were you able to breathe better with that water weight being gone? Not really. You had so much trauma going on.
Yeah. I was still laying in bed because I was in there for 2 weeks. And so, they let you kind of walk the hall. So I didn't notice it. And I am still a really high functioning heart failure patient. So I'm not one that can notice that so much. And I never, like a lot of people will retain fluid like in their abdomen or in their ankles and feet, like you see sometimes people have swollen. I never did any of that. I'm not sure where the 14 pounds were, but they weren't there. So
must have been like evenly distributed.
I guess, but yeah. And, I had other things like I had a rapid heart rate at times. I taught college for 25 years, and even at the last years when I was doing that, when I would get up to do a lecture, my heart would just pound. And I thought, I'm not nervous because I've done this for so long. And I just thought it was what happened to everybody before they did any sort of public speaking. But that was actually my heart. Just when my heart rate would go up, the rate of it would just become uncontrollable. And so if you feel that, that's something that you should be telling your doctor about. And then this one more that I have to tell you that's kind of funny. I went through these symptoms with my kids after I was diagnosed because we still didn't know if it was genetic. We didn't think so, but I was going to tell them just in case it was genetic. And I said, here's all the symptoms. And then there's another symptom that they say some people have, but I didn't have, and that was a constant dry cough. And my youngest daughter, isn't that funny? My youngest daughter said, Mom, you've always had a constant dry cough.
Wow.
She said, when we lose you in a store, that's how we find you, is we just wait for you to cough.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Okay, that gives me chills. That is an interesting sign. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, throughout your time, have you learned if there are these signs that manifest differently for men and women? Kind of like, I know for a heart attack, there are different signs. Mm-hmm. Is that the same for a heart failure?
Heart failure is a really inexact diagnosis and disease because it varies so much for people, and there's so many different ways it can happen, and then there's so many different ways that you notice it. The symptoms that I had, I think, were especially dangerous because they just looked like something else, right? They looked like I was out of shape, or they looked like menopause, or they looked like aging, and they look so insignificant. If you took each one by itself, I have a little trouble going up a hill, or, I have this little cough. Yeah. But when you look at them all together, they become this big thing. So I think for women, the risk, when we're talking specifically about heart failure, is that we tend to cover those up and ignore them because we're pushing through and we're going, full steam ahead. We're taking care of other people. And so we tend to cover those up with our responsibilities. And I think that's what happened to me. I think, women tend to just try to take care of the things that are big for other people. And right. I think that's the biggest risk. Now, as far as just in general, I don't think there are different ones for men and women, but specifically just if you think something feels wrong with anything that has to do with breathing or your heart beating, that's something to ask your doctor about for sure.
Yeah. Okay, that is really great advice. I'm just imagining that people listening here, like, okay, if you're seeing signs, definitely go to the doctor right away. But sit down and kind of reflect probably and write some notes on, I have some of these symptoms and signs, and when you're able to paint a picture for your doctor and say, this has been going on for weeks or months or whatever the case, they might be able to be like, okay, we can help you right now.
Yes, yes. Especially, and I'll tell you, I was one of those that would be like, I'll put this off until it becomes a big thing. And then when it becomes
Yeah.
a big thing, I'll go to the doctor. And this is probably true with a lot of different ailments and diseases. You have a much better outcome with heart failure if you're diagnosed early because
Yes.
they have medication, they have devices that can actually reverse it if it's in the early stages. Now,
Okay.
mine was already toward the end by the time it was found, but if you think that this isn't right, definitely talk to your doctor because my doctor, when I went in that Black Friday, he had been our doctor for decades. He was our family doctor. He's since retired, and they don't make them like this anymore. But he took care of everything. He delivered my babies. He would find something on my skin and just burn it off right there, even though he wasn't, a dermatologist. He just took care of everything. So when he took that x-ray and saw my heart so enlarged, and he said it was the largest heart he'd ever seen, he felt so bad. He couldn't believe how he'd missed it all those years. He just felt like it was his fault. And in reality, I hadn't been sharing all these things with him. And partly because, I felt like they were so small and you have that short time in the office, and you feel like they're in a hurry and they're behind. And so you're only bringing up the big stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't mention these things that just seem off, then they don't note it. And they may not do anything about your constant dry cough right then, but they're noting it. And then they're going to say, oh, but now you also have shortness of breath. And now you also have difficulty with inclines. And then it becomes something on their radar. So I would say make sure that you're sharing with your doctor, even when you feel like it's something small. And if nothing else, just, with telehealth now, since we're post-pandemic, you can just type that out and send it in, and then it's on someone's radar. And that is a huge help. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the only other thing I would say on that is don't be like me. Listen to the people that love you. My husband tried to get me to go in and get checked for this inability to exercise for years. And I was like, you run marathons. You don't even know what it's like to be a normal person. And so I didn't go. But I should have. I should have listened to him.
Yeah. That is super great advice. I love that. I'm going to write that as a quote there for you. That's great. Have you learned any misconceptions or myths throughout this journey of heart failure that you'd like to debunk?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, it started out just with me being ignorant, right? Not knowing the difference between heart failure or heart attack. And, they're both under this big umbrella called heart disease. But I always thought, and I think a lot of people do, that if you don't have a genetic issue with your heart, then anything else that could happen heart related is something that's the result of choices that you made, lifestyle choices, diet choices, exercise choices. Sometimes people get heart failure from drug usage. So, in my mind, it was like I was born with a healthy heart. Now, anything that happens to that heart is a result of choices that I make. And I remember being in the hospital the very first day, and my husband was telling someone on the phone what we were doing in the hospital, and he mentioned the word heart disease. And I got really mad at him because I didn't want that label, because it was like, no, I've taken care of myself. No, it's not heart disease. And I realized that I was really kind of ashamed to have that label. But, when we're talking specifically about heart failure, some people do get it from having clogged arteries and a resulting heart attack. And that could have been minimized sometimes by lifestyle choices. But heart failure can also happen from a virus, which is what they suspect happened to my heart. It can happen following childbirth. There's a special kind of heart failure from that. From chemotherapy, you can get heart failure resulting from that. And even there's a type of heart failure that results from emotional stress that they refer to as broken heart syndrome.
Oh, wow.
So many uncontrollable situations that even if you are very diligent and living a really healthy life, your heart can still be at risk. So, just know that. And so that's just more reason to share with your doctor and be aware, because somebody told me this right after I was diagnosed, and I thought, that's a really good tip, is that the only self-exam for heart disease is awareness.
Oh, wow.
So that's on us.
Yeah. And with that, thank you for sharing these incredible insights to help build awareness. And definitely your insights have not been, I don't know what the word is, they haven't been found easily. You had to go through the hard road. And I know your passion for helping others be aware is impacting so many.
Well, thanks, Krista. It kind of hit me because it's not in my family and I was not around a lot of heart disease. But when I learned that heart disease kills more people than all forms of cancer combined, I thought, wow, there's a lot of people that need to know, because some of us get blindsided by it. And if we can recognize it early, we can get on top of it. Medical science is doing so much, and God's provided so many avenues for us to have longer lives if we can just be aware of what's going on in our bodies.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to end this episode without giving you the chance to talk about your amazing book, which is so filled of hope and the rawness also that you experienced as you were going through your heart failure journey. Could you please talk a little bit about your book?
Yeah, thank you. It was obviously born of this unexpected diagnosis and my medical journey, but it really is it's a 40 essays that are aimed at confronting the three questions that I think anybody will encounter in their life. But you especially are aware of those questions when you get thrown off on a detour. And, mine was a health detour, but other people have different kinds of detours. It might be a relationship detour, a financial detour, loss of a child, loss of a dream, anything where you're going along and you get thrown off on a detour. And so I took my experience with heart failure and tried to make it applicable to people who are feeling like they've been detoured. And the essays are aimed at addressing those questions that come up, faith questions and life questions that come up when we find ourselves on that hard, messy detour.
Yes, and folks, I have to say, definitely get yourself a copy. I've already gifted Lorianne's book. I've read her book. It was such an honor to be on your launch team and get the behind the scenes peek into how you came to be to write the book. It was a blessing to me, and I know to so many others. So make sure to grab the book. I'm going to put links in the show notes, but I would love for you to share how else people can connect with you.
Yes, so I am Lorianne Wood on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also learn more about me and the book and my journey on my website, and that's loriannewood.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lorianne, for coming back today. I am so honored that you took the time to share these warning signs and a little bit more about yourself. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. Thank you for this Wellness Wednesday. I think it's so important to what you're doing is just it's so important and so needed. Thank you.